What's up? I'm Dave. I'm an older engineering student, and I just started going to these networking events set up for engineering students and professional engineers looking to meet people, network, and maybe advance their career in some way. Now, I have not always been into networking events, but I gave it a shot. And I'm gonna tell you why, and I'm gonna tell you how it turned out. First of all, this all started when I joined a club. There's an engineering club right here in my area, and you know they they offer memberships to students, professional engineers, and just people who want to support and be affiliated with their organization. So I joined up, and I immediately went to their event calendar where I was surprised to see they had plenty of stuff on their calendar. I got signed up for an event. I've been to two, but the first one was a private tour, a behind the scene tour at the Pennsylvania Convention Center, where the head engineer showed us some of the upgrades that they have made to their HVAC system and their water system. So a facility that big, I don't know exactly how big it is, but it's massive. The way they cool their water and prepare their water to serve to their guests, people who rent space at the convention center, and the way they get the heat, the way they handle heating the facility is different than it would be done at, like, obviously a residential place or even a smaller commercial building. So they gave us all access tour of the facility. Um, when I got there, I think I was the only student. There were probably like 10, 10 of us on the tour, two young professional engineers, me, the student, and the other guys were probably in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I think some of them were actually retired. Everyone seemed to know each other except for the one of the young guys. But they were really welcoming. The guy who coordinated the event made me feel like I was one of the crew. So that's a positive. Things started off positive. Now, they were looking at the clipboard and they saw my name, and my real name is interesting. And once they saw my name, they got excited, and the organizer introduced me to a few people by my name, and we had a little fun with it. So hopefully I'll be remembered, right? As opportunities roll out and as I start to mix it up, looking for a job and maybe an internship, maybe people will remember me. Maybe I will remember them. I can tell you, after the event, I made an intentional effort to reach out to the organizer because he actually has his own firm right in Philadelphia. In fact, I met like three or four people who have their own firms right there in Center City. So, wow, you got to be doing good. You're probably doing good if you have an office like right on like Walnut Street and, in that area. So, I was in good company and they welcomed me. And if nothing else comes from it, it was just a great start, because we want to make a pattern, build a habit of getting out there, meeting the movers and shakers. Even if you can't get a job from these people, the conversation is good. Like the conversations, the questions that I got to hear on that tour, right? Because you're on a tour with a professional engineer who's touring other professional engineers. So, all of the conversation was on a level. So it was just cool just to hear, the sort of considerations that needed to be made with buying the controls and PLCs for a building like that. They were talking about like who services the controls. Is it going to be the people who set it up, or is it going to be in-house guys? So getting to hear how they make those decisions. I mean, they were talking about how they chill the water and how they had different systems and different ways. They had a way to chill the water virtually for free by by running it around the building in pipes where what am I trying to say? The ambient temperature was able to cool the water sufficiently. So they were talking about like switching the system between like the natural way versus a more mechanized way. So that was interesting. That was the first event. Like I said, once I left, I tried to stay in touch with one of the people. You know, I let them know, like, hey, I'm going to be in touch with you one way or another. So the next event I went to was geared for young professionals and engineering students. It was a resume writing workshop. And I'm going to tell you up front, I definitely got a lot out of it. You know, one, just to be in the environment, you know, talking to people who were at the beginning of their career. There were probably like 17 people there. I think most of them were engineers, like mostly young guys, you know, within their first few years of their career. One guy was talking about how he started at a community college. Another guy was talking about how he drove trucks. I think he delivered like asphalt or something like that while he was earning his degree. So, you know, folks are really coming from all sorts of backgrounds and really humble beginnings. You know, I mean, after all, these things are just jobs. It's education and then it's a job, you know. So if you want this sort of education and this sort of job, you just start. You don't have to come from a perfect place. You don't have to come from a storybook beginning. You know, your beginning is your beginning. Um, so there's encouragement in that. That was reassuring. But let's talk about the resume stuff. There were three presenters. One was on via Skype or that other thing similar to Skype. I can't think of it. Zoom. So one person presented via Zoom, and then they had two presenters in person. And the two in-person presenters were great. At the end of the session, they took a look at our resumes, and I let them rip mine apart. I knew mine wasn't ready, but you know it was good to have those eyes on it because they gave me confirmation that I could do what I had been thinking of. Right, my work experience, which I have plenty of, is in the subsidized housing industry. And now I'm going to make this big jump to the science slash tech world. It's like, how do I find relevant and applicable things to put into the resume? You know, when I first redid my resume, I was only at my first semester. My first semester. So, like, my core competency wasn't really that high yet. I didn't have much that I could talk about. Since then, I've done a lot of circuit analysis. I'm taking digital circuits, more physics, machining classes where I, you know, work with metal. We're like building these air engines. So now I have more that I could put on the resume. And they were telling me that, hey, your applicable experience and skill set, the skill set that you're developing right now can actually take precedence over that work experience. So now I'm just feeling that much better. It's like, okay, I can put together a more substantial resume, and it's been stamped by these presenters who, one is a recruiter for a firm that finds engineering talent. She looks at tons of resumes. So to have her kind of give me that blessing, it's cool. Like, she actually sat down and crossed things off my resume and wrote notes. I was like, yo, go ahead, do your thing. So it was cool. Now the other presenter, who had a great background as well, she had been interviewed by some dream companies and had jobs with some amazing companies. But she looked at my resume as well. She gave me some feedback, and she extended an offer to me. She said, hey, find me on LinkedIn. Well, don't find me. She wrote her name down, but she said, connect with me on LinkedIn, and after you make those revisions to your resume, let me see it because I'll continue to work with you on shaping that thing. So, hey, I left with some genuine connections from both events. I feel good about it, and I used to look at intentional networking in kind of a with a side eye, because when I first started hearing about like networking events, it was like pre MySpace and then MySpace days. And a lot of this stuff was like people who didn't have much to offer wanting to hang around folks who they thought would put them on. And it left a foul taste in my mouth. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, but it just felt cheesy. And I felt like if you were really serious about advancing in your craft, profession, or entrepreneurial endeavors, you should spend the bulk of your time actually doing the thing versus hanging around people who are hoping somebody will put them on to the thing. And that was a narrow view of it, but it was shaped by the people I was around. Like I said, it was really just like happy hour, and people with business cards that said CEO, but they hadn't built anything yet. We were in the CEO era. If you think the boss era is bad now, like you should have seen it like early internet days. Like people would get these business cards. They would get stacks of business cards printed up and it would say CEO of this and CEO of that. So this is like the second coming of that. Anyway, that's here nor there because regardless of how they misrepresented what networking could be, networking is a great thing. Even when it's intentional, yes, I've always been a fan of like just happenstance, but like, yeah, intentional networking events can be great. Based on my experience at these two engineering events, I plan to go to a lot more events and I'll keep you posted as I grow and meet people.